The title of our TOK presentation is The Illusion of Free Will.
He suffered fourth-degree burns over 8% of his body. If he survives, he'll be paralyzed from the waist down, confined to a wheelchair.
You say you can save him. What does that mean? What kind of life will he have?
Consider this. It's not. It's you. What the hell did you do with me? Make him more tactical. Make him look, let's go black. When the machine fights, the system releases signals into Alice's brain, making him think he's in control. But he's not. It's the illusion of free will. I've selected 13 targets, all wanted for murder.
Okay, Josue, the trailer to Robocop looks amazing.
Oh yeah, sure it was. Although I didn't like that nonsense about the neurotransmitters affecting Robocop and him not being actually in control.
Oh, you mean the part of the free will and illusion part? Well, to a certain extent, I do believe that neurotransmitters and the brain actually makes us who we are. We actually act, we think, we process things emotionally because of this neurotransmitter, don't you think?
Oh come on, that doesn't make any sense. If I murder someone, will I blame it on my brain chemistry?
Oh,
Or
come on, Jose.
if I fail math this?
Don't go so far away. But I mean, I've been reading this article, and it's about a man who developed pedophilia after he developed a brain tumor. And it's very interesting. It has to do with the free will and how it seems to be an illusion.
What? Really? Let's check that article.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, fellow knowers. Today, the group integrated by Johnny Kim, Jose Alvarado, and myself, Sujui Liu, will have the honor to delight you with this TOK presentation concerning free will. So sit back, relax, and without further ado, we bring to you the illusion of free will. Now, our knowledge issue arises as we were reading this very interesting article where it claims that a man was convicted to be a pedophile. Now, it was found that in his brain, more specifically, his frontal right lobe had a tumor the size of an egg. Now, the interesting thing comes here. After that tumor was removed from his brain, his pedophilic behavior seemed to completely cease, and that gives entrance to our knowledge issue. Now, this is the title of the article and our knowledge issue. To what extent do we have can we hold responsibility for our own actions? And here I pass the control to my comrade who will explain a bit more about natural sciences as an area of knowledge.
Okay, thank you, Napoleon. So today, now I'm going to explore these knowledge issues through the natural sciences. We all now know that the cerebellum, which is located in the back part of the brain, controls the basic functions of our life, such as breathing, heart rates, and all that stuff. If you go down to the biological line, we say that the genes code for everything we do. For instance, basic instinct of survival, of reproduction, sleeping, eating, all those are embedded into our genes, and that's what makes us want to survive and to try to procreate our species so that we don't get extinct. But there comes the question: how can some behavior be actually embedded into the genes that are not actually instinctive behaviors, such as the instinct to live? Okay. So even though if this was true, could we actually blame everything on genetics? So we could just kill somebody and say, oh, I didn't do that. It was my brain, it was my genes. Or could we just flunk a test or just not prepare for a TOK presentation and say that, oh, because my genes made me dumb, I won't do this presentation. I'm too useless, I'm too stupid to do anything. Could we actually do that? Well, there's actually a trait or circumstances where the genetics define who we are. For instance, diabetes, especially diabetes type 1, is largely known to be caused because of the genetics. These people with diabetes have to be injecting insulin every single meal or have to be controlling their diet. They cannot eat high sugar foods, they cannot eat high carbohydrate content food, because if they do so, they will have high sugar content and they can, this can even lead to their death. So we can see that the genetics in this case is what defines these people, and they cannot move away from it. They have to be injecting, they have to be controlling their diets. And even if we knew that the genetics actually control behaviors, the certain behaviors, how reliable are the tests that we do to prove that there is a connection between the behavior and the genetics, or in the case of the article, the brain tumor that was placed, that was found in the frontal lobe of his brain. So now we know, through the Human Genome Project, which was completed some years back, all of the genes that code for all of the proteins that makes every single human. However, we don't know how the behavior connects with the genes. So here comes in psychology. We need to connect the biological part of the natural sciences with the psychological, the human sciences. As we all know, human sciences and natural sciences both have these paradigms that are set. And if we try to prove something, we create a theory, the time when there is a paradigm shift, all of the premises that made up this theory actually falls. And also, the scientific method used to try to prove the connection between the behavior and the genetics or the brain tumor is created by getting a sample of a population, which may create a lot of generalization. So in this case, we could be locking up a man even though he's innocent, or you could set this man who is actually pedophilic because of his nature, because of other factors rather than the brain tumor. So the brain tumor was thought to be found in the frontal part of the right hemisphere of the brain, which is known to be the creative part, the emotional part, and the part of the brain where we think that judgment occurs. So this was a theory that actually was used to set this man free eventually. However, how accurate is the MRI or the fMRI that they actually used? I mean, they are accurate. They can be used to find the tumor, but how can we connect that information with the actual analysis of the behavioral data of the pedophilic instincts of this man? There could be a lot of other factors, such as bullying, family arguments, family disputes, and even cultural differences that could be causing these problems. And this is known as the principle of simplicity, where we just assume that because we found a correlation between the brain tumor in this case and the pedophilic behavior, we assume that that is the cause, and we don't take into consideration other factors such as the external factors of society, culture, etc. Okay, so finally, even if we had the technology to actually connect the behavior with the physiological part of the people, how ethical would it be? Which will be, this part of the question will be explored more in depth with Napoleon. We'll talk about ethics, and now I'm going to pass this to Josue. We'll talk through the human sciences.
Now, through the human sciences lens, more specifically psychology, it is required to clarify that psychology has a major flaw, which is the psychologist's fallacy. Although the psychology normally analyzes the personality characteristics and uses perception to analyze these things and gather the data in order to make a solid conclusion, this one doesn't know the knowledge that the test subject has. And therefore, he doesn't take it into consideration which can actually change a result. Then, we can also take into account identity. Does this pedophile actually have any identity? And if there is such thing, because the word identity could easily be a fact-value distinction. It could mean something totally different to me than it could to you. And furthermore, there are a lot of undiscovered factors that could have influenced the behavior of this pedophile. We don't know if he actually did experience something during his childhood or adolescence which could have influenced his behavior, and it only surfaced until he had a tumor. But assuming this, would that probably be a flaw of the article, assuming that perhaps the tumor had something to do with the behavior? If we observe the behavior of this pedophile the first time he got the tumor and he stopped, and just assume that it happened a second time and it was because of the same cause, would that be a misleading vividness? Or will it be a solid conclusion? There is enough evidence to tell us that the pedophile actually stopped his behavior once the tumor was removed. However, this can't be justified because of the observer effect. And we also have characteristics of psychology saying that there are traits that can be shared during personality or behavior disorders. But psychology still needs more analysis and needs more technology in order to develop further ideas and other theories that could perhaps explain more in depth about this case. This is why would it be necessary to actually run an MRI scan for every single pedophile? Even if we actually know that factors influence their childhood and factors actually influence their adolescence, do we have to check for every single criminal to make sure that they don't have a tumor and influences them to cause felonies? Well, there are a lot of things such as emotions that can't be understood fully yet. And like previously stated, technology is yet to reach that point. And we don't know if further different disorders we actually share traits with such of a pedophilia. Now, basic life drives such as life and death prove to dominate a human mind in most cases. But can there be, or how does this affect his good judgment? We know that the tumor influenced this pedophile, or at the moment he wasn't a pedophile. How much did it affect his good judgment? Can he even have willpower at that point? Or is it a misconception of himself as not seeing the true event? Perhaps it's just another disorder that hasn't been diagnosed correctly. Can there be moral absolutism in this? Can someone actually come and say that it is right or it was wrong that he had the tumor and did this criminal act? There is a lot of relativism on whether or not this is correct. The article states that ethical judgment was applied to the criminal based on his demonstration of disappointment. He did manifest some guilt. However, it can be argued that that can also be a part of a pedophile. Now, a modern psychiatrist, Raymond N.C., made knowledge claims, saying that made studies of 42 pedophiles in which he discovered that 55% abuse drugs. Not only that, he also researched that pedophiles can seek for medical help in order to deal with their own disorders and to control themselves, to the point that they can no longer satisfy themselves through their distressing fantasies. Now, it could still be an animal instinct, but if this one drive actually overpowers his being and drives him to the point of actually making child pornography, how much can we actually blame on drugs? The other 45% actually was responsible for their acts. And in the case of the activo, was it a tumor or was it him? We don't have proof of any, but we can actually say that drugs could actually amplify the effect and could make the pedophile go into more sordid actions. Perhaps if drugs are able to control inhibitions, can they actually control thoughts? If the next time someone is under the influence of a drug, can they actually blame it on the drug? Well, there was no sight of the behaviorism on the pedophilic individual once the tumor was excised. But he presented these specified factors once the tumor grew again. We don't know the origins of a tumor, and we don't know how this one could actually influence into the brain. technology has yet to reach that point in which natural sciences can explain how does a tumor can influence the brain. And therefore, there is a lot of assumptions that could be made. For instance, post hoc ergo propter hoc is a coincidental fallacy, linking two exclusive factors from each other and making a single conclusion. It could easily be that the tumor just occurred or happened to occur at the same time that he manifested these emotions or actions. It could also be related to magical thinking. A large portion of humans actually have magical thinking. Our ancestors had magical thinking. Putting special values into different artifacts is something that is required for our basic survival in some sense. A very generic example of this are luck charms. Now, James Lange theory could also apply in this case. It could very well be that the psychology took part before the emotion, and perhaps this individual wasn't aware or was subconsciously aware of what he was doing, but didn't react until later, which will explain why he felt guilty and why the courtroom actually applied ethical judgment based on that. But it needs to be taken into further consideration if whether or not this individual even has willpower, or if he even has self-control to that point. Perhaps his sensation-seeking overpowered all these other drives and dominated him completely. Perhaps it was a primitive thing that actually forced him to do that. Well, it could very well be, but perhaps it was also only the brain and emotions working together controlling the individual while he wasn't aware of this. And now, Napo will analyze the ethics.
Hello everybody, ethics over here. Now, we have been talking a lot about brain tumors, and I believe that all of us here know that tumors can arise unpredictably and randomly, no matter what part of the world you are from or what sex you are. Now, the issue lies on that different part of the world think different. Different countries, different cities have different perspective on the same issue. And now, that leads to this question. Well, first of all, the differences are caused by different beliefs, norms, religion, traditions, or different rules in different parts of the world. That gives rise to the question, to what extent do values and cultural beliefs affect the judgment of an individual? Now, this is very interesting, as how can this victim be victimized and not criminalized for his actions? And how can this be decided with so much moral relativism around the world? Now, there is the issue of the cultural imperialism. Different lenses allows us to analyze and see the case thoroughly. However, with so much cultural imperialism exerting a social force, a social pressure on us, how can we decide essentially, ethically and correctly? Now, does right enter here? Does this suspect have the right to do what he did, to have this pedophilic behavior? Now, if we, according to ethical egoism, yes, he was on his rights. He was just fulfilling what he desired, which was the pedophilic behavior. But if we take altruism, he is not doing the correct thing, as he is not benefiting anybody but himself and actually damaging other people. Now, it is very interesting how the people would judge the tumor as a separate entity and not part of himself. Now, if the tumor is judged as a separate entity, how can this suspect pay for something he did not do? Now, with this presentation, we obviously have to take technology into consideration, as it is ever so increasing and developing day by day. Now, numerous samples will have to be taken, as natural sciences and human sciences have specified, and they would not be animal samples, as the human brain is much more complex than that of an animal. Now, how correct would it be to carry out this experiment on the sake, for the sake of science? Because it is ever so intrusive. Now, again, we can take altruism as a way, according to altruism, it is actually correct as we are sacrificing the few to help the many, or the popular phrase, sacrifice 1,000 to save the million. Okay, human sciences and natural sciences have stated that external factors have a link with the behavior of the suspects. Now, according to utilitarianism, it is correct to conduct this experiment. However, isn't this similar like the Tuskegee project, where they deliberately made people with syphilis? They didn't cure the people with syphilis to see the natural progression of that disease. Can we actually let tumors grow on people to actually study the correlation between tumor and behavior? Now, is it worth it if it is on the expense of people's life? That's the question. Now, if such study were to happen, would that prove the man's innocence, or would that incriminate him? These are the pictures of the Tuskegee project taking place. And now, one huge issue is our ethics invented? Is it just an appeal for probability, or just the fallacy of the rule of worship? Now, we know that ethics rely on objectivity instead of subjectivity. But however, with so much confirmation bias, this is not very feasible. Because of the confirmation bias, if he were to be innocent, what other cases of suspects having tumor correlating with their behavior, would they also be judged the same way and be told innocent? Now, here's a question. If this suspect were to commit murder instead of pedophilic behaviors, would he be judged the same because of that tumor? Now, does he have priority over other suspects, other pedophiles, because of this tumor? Is he to be judged differently? That's a question to think about. Now, with so much information we have told, we can only arrive to one thing. Our ethics have not developed so far. Our ethical system have not developed to comprehend and to judge these extreme cases such as this one.
So, to what extent do we hold responsibility for our own actions? Once again, sense perception proves to be a huge obstacle to this, and irrealism is a huge problem that can't yet crack this type of problem. Perhaps one day human sciences and natural science will come together with technology and develop new theories about free will and investigate further in the complexity of the human brain. And maybe then we will be able to judge this individual correctly and know if he was really responsible for his own actions. Until then, we live under the illusion of free will.
Thank you very much.